welcome back. So we're going to talk about what makes a quality user story. So there's this acronym called the INVEST framework that was created by Bill Wake, who's one of the early product manager, like founding fathers of Agile, so to speak, right? So he created this acronym to explain and describe what makes a good user story. And this is really useful for understanding the right abstraction level between epics and user stories. So just a quick explanation of epics versus user stories. Epics are the great idea that you want to accomplish. So if we go back to this user story as Jocelyn, the animated agency designer, I want pro-level animation so I don't have to use other design tools to accomplish more advanced animations in my designs. Again, a bit wordy. But in reality, this story is going to require multiple sub-stories to complete this. It's going to also require follow-up research. What animations should we prioritize? Which animations should we build first, right? So each of those animations that you build is a separate story, right? And the order in which you build them requires some research to understand prioritization and the totality of which animations you will include in this epic story will be the outcome of what you think is a holistic pro-level animation suite that you hypothesize will move the needle for revenue in terms of these individual or small team, 1 or 2 person teams that need these pro-level animations, that they will actually upgrade their account to a paid account when right now they're using everything for free for access to these pro-level animations. Okay, so as we break down what makes a quality user story, I'll kind of break out what I just talked about with why the above story is an epic user story, not a regular story. So, and that really hinges on this first point of being independent. So if I can't ship this to market independently of another story, then it's an epic, right? If I can ship it independently and it's going to create value, this third one, then it's a story. Okay, negotiable goes back to the story I told in a previous video where I had a feature for the scheduling product that I work on that we needed to have built. We prioritized it, we knew what the solution was, and I had some designs and some mock-ups kind of visually explaining it for conversational purposes, right? And the way I had written the story, or better yet, the acceptance criteria, which we'll get to, the developer looked at me and said, yes, we can do it this way, but it's going to take 6 weeks because I'm going to have to redo some stuff. But if we can use the existing pattern for how we do things, I can get it done in a week, right? So that's the negotiable aspect, is that there needs to be a negotiation around the how, not as much the what, right? There probably should be some wiggle room on the what in like how we solve this problem or the thing that we deliver. But the point is, whether it's on the substance of the what or the implementation how, it needs to be negotiable. Valuable, we already explained that. If it doesn't create value by releasing the story alone, then it's probably an epic, because there's multiple, or belongs to an epic, right? Because you need other things, other stories to be completed before there's actual value created for the end user. Estimable goes back to your developers. Can they estimate how long this is going to take? If it's really hard to estimate, chances are it's an epic. The smaller the chunk is, or the smaller the user story is, the more easily it is to estimate, or the easier, if I can speak, it is to estimate. Small goes back to the ability to estimate it. The smaller it is, the easier it is to estimate. And then testable, this goes to the acceptance criteria, which we're going to talk about in the next video, where whether it's the developers running unit test or the QA team going and running their QA test, there needs to be like almost a step-by-step call out of how this thing needs to be tested and what's the expectations of functionality. You could even have, and we'll get into this, you could even have acceptance criteria for design things like the hex codes for the colors, the parameters, those kind of things. And so you can get to that level of granularity, and a lot of developers appreciate having that in the story or in the acceptance criteria of the story. So that way they make sure that they get it right when they're actually implementing what you've designed and defined, right? So to give you a concrete example of this, right? So let's go to my example. So in reality, that epic story of Jocelyn, the agency designer, needing pro level animations, that's an epic. And what I talked about before is I would need to run an experiment because I don't have the confidence level yet, going back to that RICE framework, to fully embark on building for that epic, right? There's follow-up research I would need to do, and some further definition of what animation should we build and prioritize. But before we get to that point, I want to make sure that this is the thing that's going to move the needle, or that this is the thing that has the potential to move the needle. And I don't have that level of confidence yet. So I will start with an experiment, but to implement that experiment, I'm still going to need stories. Okay. So the first one here, the first story would be around this notification. Okay. So we're trying to gauge interest. There's a notification. We want people to click on this and click that they're interested. Okay. So if right now this notification icon, if we want to change how this looks, or if there's anything going on visually with this, that's going to require a story as part of the story. The color definition, any text or copy changes will need to be defined, and what actually goes into the notification will need to be defined. So that's going into acceptance criteria a little bit, but the story would be, as a Figma user, or you could even get more specific and target this experiment to specific user groups, right? Because you've already gotten data. If this is possible, if you're set up to capture this level of data, you might already know who's currently using animations in their prototypes, right? And so if you can target those users specifically with this, then it'll be more impactful. But you might want to open it up broader to even people that aren't using it, to see if maybe they're not currently using animations because the animations they need don't exist. That's a call that you have to make as a product manager. But the story could be, as a free Figma user, I should see a notification in this page letting me know that advanced animations are coming. Okay, so that's a story. Okay, and there would be acceptance criteria attached to it. But here's the test. Is this independent? Is this something that you could release on its own and get value from it? Or do you need the second story? So before you answer, let's go to the second story. As a free Figma user, I need to see that there's an advanced option under the animations feature, so that I can express my interest in this feature, right? Just, this is off the top of my head, so probably not the exact wording I would use for the story, but I hope you get the point, right? So is this independent of this? Can you get value from this independently of the other, right? Or vice versa? Could you implement this feature showing that there's an advanced option? When they click on it, it's really just a smoke test, and they can say that they're interested in advanced animations, right? Or you're just judging clicks, or however you want to define this experiment and how it should actually be executed. Could you get value out of this? Okay, I paused for a second because I want you to think about it. So if you're still thinking about it, pause the video and then come back. Okay, I assume you paused the video and came back. So I would say yes, right? If I did this independently of the notification on the other screen, then I could gauge when people are coming through that they say, oh, there's an advanced option, and I'm going to click on it and I'm going to measure how many people click to this advanced animation. And then as a second level of interest, if I have like a pop-up that says, hey, thanks for expressing interest in advanced animations, would you like to be notified when they're available, right? And then I can click how many people say no thanks, or how many people say yes, please let me know. And that gives me a better idea of the quantity of people who are interested in this. In a similar vein, right? So here, I can release this independently all by itself. People who click the interested button when they see that there's a notification. Okay, so these stories would be independent, valuable, negotiable, and as we go through that invest list, it meets all of those criteria, right? So let's go back through it. You can estimate how long this would take. It's a pretty small thing. It's testable because in your development environment or your alpha environment, kind of that environment where code gets pushed or new features get pushed to be tested before they go to the market, you can test to see if this works, right? And the data collection in the back end and some of those things as well. But it meets this criteria, whereas this other story does not, right? There's other things that would have to come together, independent stories that would have to come together to form a whole solution that would create value, right? So this level of abstraction is a bit too high to meet that invest criteria. To be a user story that meets this, you have to find the right level of abstraction to meet these criteria. So I hope that makes sense, right? If you're too high level, that's what I mean by abstraction level. If you're too high level in your explanation, it's probably a bigger thing that requires being more high level, a bigger, hairier problem to solve, right? But if it's a smaller thing, like an experiment, going back here, you can do something like this independently. But knowing that there could be different touch points or that people may not see this notification, you might want to release two separate valuable stories to run the same one experiment. Okay. So I hope that makes sense on abstraction levels. It's more of an art than a science around finding the right abstraction level between epics and user stories. But to help with that, this invest framework created by Bill Wake is really, really helpful as a checklist of sorts to gut check yourself to see if that what you've written qualifies as a story, or if it's an epic, or if it should be associated to an epic because it's going to require other things to produce value. Okay, so with that, we've touched on acceptance criteria a lot throughout this video, but I'm going to get more specific and actually write out some acceptance criteria for those experiments or the designs of the experiments that I showed. So that way you can kind of see the level of detail and granularity that I would get to. And in reality, some product managers might do it different than me, right? Some don't include design details. Some might keep things more high level in the acceptance criteria. Some developers prefer to write the acceptance criteria. The important thing is that you know what acceptance criteria is, how to write it, okay, and how to make it valuable for your developers and your QA team, whether it's you writing it, whether you're collaborating with your developers. And we'll talk about this more in the next video. So I will not belabor the point. I will see you in the next video.